the dead of a Belgian winter, on December the 17th, 1944, the most powerful armored weapon of the Second World War ground to a halt. The Tiger II tank, a 70-ton beast of steel and firepower, sat silent in the pre-dawn gloom. Its commander, the decorated SS Colonel Joachim Peiper, slammed a fist against the cold turret. The engine had coughed, sputtered, and died. All around him, stretching back for miles into the misty Ardennes forest, his entire battle group, Kampfgruppe Peiper, was paralyzed. 67 tanks, hundreds of armored vehicles, and nearly 5,000 of Germany's most elite soldiers were motionless, transformed from a terrifying armored spearhead into a frozen, helpless traffic jam. They were the tip of the spear for Hitler's last great gamble in the West, the Battle of the Bulge. They were supposed to be smashing through American lines, racing for the Meuse River, and changing the entire course of the war. But now they were dead in the water. What could possibly stop such a force? What weapon had the Americans deployed to neutralize Germany's finest so completely? The answer was both absurdly simple and profoundly terrifying. The fuel gauges all read empty. This wasn't just a logistical hiccup. It was a symptom of a terminal disease that had infected the entire German war machine. Peiper knew the plan was desperate from the start. His orders were not just to fight, but to hunt. The entire offensive was designed around a strategy of profound weakness. They had to capture American fuel to survive. Germany, the nation that had perfected the blitzkrieg, the lightning-fast mechanized assault, could no longer power its own machines. The plan was to literally run on the enemy's gas. As his men shivered in their stalled vehicles, Peiper gazed through the mist at the small village of Hansfeld. It was an American supply depot, abandoned in haste. The GIs had fled so quickly they'd left coffee still warm and fires still burning. And there, lined up like a gift from the heavens, were rows upon rows of American jerry cans. Thousands of them. It was a miracle. A junior officer pried one open and sniffed. Gasoline, Herr Obersturmbannführer, high octane. The relief was electric. His men scrambled from their vehicles, frantically beginning the work of refueling. Peiper walked through the enormous stockpile, doing the math in his head. 50,000 gallons. It was a staggering amount. Enough to fill every tank, every half-track, every vehicle in his entire Kampfgruppe. Enough fuel to get them to the Meuse River and perhaps beyond. In that moment, it felt like salvation. The offensive was back on. The war was still winnable. But as he stood amidst this incredible bounty, watching his elite SS soldiers pouring American fuel into the engines of German Panzers, a cold, crushing realization began to dawn on him. A question that would unravel everything he thought he knew about the war. Why would the Americans just leave this here? If they could afford to abandon what was, to Germany, a war-winning treasure, then what did that say about the enemy they were fighting? This wasn't a miracle. It was a death sentence. To understand the profound shock Peiper felt, you have to understand the state of Germany in late 1944. The Third Reich was running on fumes, literally. For months, Allied bombers had been systematically erasing Germany's ability to produce fuel. The sprawling Leuna works, the heart of Germany's synthetic fuel production, had its output slashed by over 95%. The refineries at Pölitz, Blechhammer, and Brucks were ghost towns, operating at less than 10% capacity. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, had presented the Führer with reports showing, in cold, hard numbers, that Germany could no longer wage a mobile war. The Luftwaffe was grounding its most advanced fighters, not for lack of pilots, but for lack of aviation fuel. Pilot training was slashed from hundreds of flight hours to a mere 60. The mighty German Navy, the Kriegsmarine, was a ghost fleet, its battleships and cruisers rusting in port, unable to sail. On the home front, civilian traffic had been banned for years. Gasoline was a substance more precious than gold, and the Gestapo would launch full-scale investigations into the black market theft of a single liter. The nation that had once conquered a continent was reverting to horse-drawn carts. Now, contrast that with the United States. In 1944, America didn't just have an oil industry, it was the oil industry. The United States produced a staggering 1.8 billion barrels of crude oil that year. Germany, even counting all its synthetic plants and captured Romanian oil fields, produced just 33 million barrels. That's less than 2% of American production. The East Texas oil field by itself produced more oil than all of Axis-occupied Europe combined. This wasn't a gap, it was a chasm. While German logisticians were rationing fuel by the liter, the Americans were dealing with a problem of such massive abundance that they had to invent new ways to move it all. They built a system called the Red Ball Express, a fleet of nearly 6,000 trucks operating 24/7 on dedicated one-way highways across France, delivering over 12,500 tons of supplies to the front every single day. The fuel consumed by the trucks of the Red Ball Express alone was more than an entire German army group received in a month. But even that wasn't enough. So they performed an engineering miracle called Operation Pluto, Pipeline Under the Ocean. They laid flexible pipelines across the bottom of the English Channel, pumping over 1 million gallons of fuel directly from Britain to France every day. From there, a sprawling network of pipes spread inland, a circulatory system pumping the lifeblood of war directly to the front lines. By December 1944, American forces in Europe were consuming 1.2 million gallons of fuel per day, and their logistical network was delivering 1.4 million. They were fighting a massive, high-intensity battle, and still adding 200,000 gallons to their strategic reserves every single day. This was the context that Joachim Peiper was beginning to understand as his men refueled at Huntsville. His miraculous find of 50,000 gallons was less than 5% of what the Americans were pumping across the channel every single day. It was a rounding error. As his men worked, the evidence of this terrifying reality mounted. One of his sergeants, who could read English, found the shipping manifests in the abandoned depot office. He brought them to Peiper. The papers detailed the journey of this gasoline, from a refinery in Texas, to a port in New York, across the Atlantic, to Liverpool, across the Channel to Normandy, and then trucked 400 miles to this tiny depot in Belgium. The entire journey of over 6,000 miles had taken less than 6 weeks. Peiper read the documents, crumpled them in his fist, and said nothing. His face, according to the sergeant, went pale. Then another soldier found a stack of the American military newspaper, Stars and Stripes. The papers were dated December 15th, just 2 days old. The headline celebrated the opening of a brand new pipeline from Cherbourg to Verdun, a pipeline capable of delivering 300,000 gallons of fuel per day. A single, secondary pipeline was delivering 6 times more fuel every day than the amount Peiper had just captured and believed to be his salvation. The feeling of victory evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. They weren't fighting another army. They were fighting an industrial planet. With his tanks full of American gasoline, Peiper's Kampfgruppe roared back to life and surged forward. They were back on schedule, a lethal spearhead once again. They smashed through the village of Bullingen, capturing more American supplies, food, ammunition, and most importantly, maps. But the maps only deepened the horror. They showed the locations of other American fuel depots in the area, and they were everywhere. Every major crossroads, every small town seemed to have its own massive fuel stockpile. The U.S. First Army alone had over 3.5 million gallons sitting in reserve depots just behind the front lines. Piper pushed on, his forces growing more desperate and brutal, committing the infamous Malmedy massacre, where they murdered 84 unarmed American prisoners of war. Even this atrocity was born of logistical panic. Piper would later claim he couldn't spare the fuel to transport prisoners to the rear. By the evening of December the 17th, his advance guard